All right, we're going live on YouTube and live on Twitch right now. We are going to watch the Tim Walz on the Gavin Newsom podcast. I've heard a lot of people, talking about this. I wanted to see what this conversation is about. I'm trying to continue to explore how to be able to understand both sides of the aisle in these chaotic times, as long as people it just seems like people just continue to get further and further away as we go. Um, and it sucks because I feel like most people are on the same wavelength in a sense once you get down to like the brass tacks of stuff. But as we continue to get into world of politicians and business people and the media and the discourse, it feels like it gets loopier and loopier every day. Um, so I wanted to just like watch this live, have real reactions, and just kind of roll from there. So let's jump right into it.
This is Gavin Newsom. And this is Governor Tim Walz. All right, Governor, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for being with us.
I am. Thanks for having me. I'm kind of wondering where I fall on this list of guests, but I'm excited. You and I've been friends for a while, so
We've
no,
been
I
friends.
appreciate it. But you and I had talked about this for a while, trying to understand during a Trump presidency, how do we best serve our folks? How do we get back there? And that the Democratic Party, I mean, we all need to be very candid, is not all that popular right now.
Well, that's where I wanted to start just right up top. I mean, the timing of this, it couldn't be more opportunistic for both of us as Democratic governors. Look, we're in the tank. I mean, it's not just a rough spot. It's an historically low, at least in modern polling, back to the 1990s. CNN had the Democratic Party brand now down to about 29%. And it was even worse in an NBC poll that showed 27% of people supporting our party. You've been out on the road. You were just in a couple of red states. You've been doing town halls. We've talked about this in the past privately. It's not just about what you say and how you say it. It's also about where you say it. Yeah. So I love the fact you were out there. So give us a sense. I mean, what?
Now, just to preface this a little bit, I'm a guy from Minnesota. I do live in California right now. I definitely stand more on the right than I do on the left. I've struggled a lot with the ways that Tim Walz has represented Minnesota. There's a lot to how Minnesota dealt with COVID that leads me to really struggling with trusting a lot of Walz. Granted, don't live there right now, so it's not like my opinion is the biggest matter, but it's a place that I love. It's a place that I grew up. It's a place that I still have family. So with all that being said, that's kind of where I preface some of the jump off of this conversation. I do have a little bit of skin in the game. I grew up and I still love this place. Diehard Viking fan. There's so many different memories that I've had living in different communities that basically no longer exist because of some of the fallout of COVID and the unrest that we experienced in Minnesota.
What your over-under is about where the hell our party is right now.
Well, and I think that's what people are doing. Look, this is something hadn't been done what you're doing, and people are, and we're trying to enter spaces, and look, I don't know if all of them are going to work. I don't. But the fact of the matter is, we don't want to win elections just to say Democrats won elections. We want to win elections to improve people's lives. When we're losing elections, chaos reigns, which we're seeing right now. I'm at a town hall, and these folks are standing up. They're a VA nurse. They're concerned what's happening at the VA. They're a farmer that's concerned. They're folks that are concerned about their personal reproductive rights and their life choices. And if we can't be a respected opposition or alternative, that really worries me. And I say this, Gavin, that I didn't go to the Democrats. They came to me with Social Security, with GI Bill. It was clear when, at least my age growing up, Democrats stood with working people, Republicans stood with the wealthy. And there was nothing necessarily wrong with that. That, it was at least an argument. It feels much more polarized now, but people don't see us as that. And
It's
so
they see it exactly the opposite of that. That we're the party of the elites. That we don't represent. We represent quote unquote others. We don't represent them. And this notion that the working class now has embraced Donald Trump is extraordinary. And so,
and the
what do you mean?
billionaires.
I mean,
And the
you were
billionaires.
out on the camp. You were out on the campaign trail. I mean, it's such an interesting conversation for me to have with you, and for those.
And some of the interesting things about this, I do think that Gavin Newsom is saying the things that need to be said right now, but sometimes the places that the conversation ends up going with him, I have a hard time believing that he understands the things that he's saying. He does a great job of like providing lip service to what he knows is supposed to be discussed right now. As far as the Democratic Party doesn't get it, there's some huge blind spots. They don't represent the larger population of the United States at this moment, because Donald Trump did win a free and clear election through general and also just from greater population and from electoral college. The reason the Democrats are in such an interesting space, one, Gavin Newsom's one of the only Democrats I feel like is actually saying it right now. But then again, I think oddly enough, his ideology seems to be almost some of the most disconnected. So at least he's doing a good job of being in the conversation. So I got to give him a little bit of credit for that. But there's a lot of oddness to him. Walz, it's going to be interesting to see if he can actually close the gap on the really the deeper understanding of where the divide is. Because for me right now, the divide is just being able to speak to people, being able to have people trust you, not necessarily always trust even sometimes what you're saying, but trust what you'll do. That's some of, and I'll probably get to it deeper, but Republican voters definitely trust what Trump is generally doing. They understand that his lip service is lip service sometimes, and his actions will guide the whole party in the direction that they desire. That's what the general consensus is at this moment, where the Democrats can say all this stuff up front, and people would desire that they would do these actions, but that generally hasn't been the case since, at least I've been a voter. I'm 37 years old. I've voted in every single election. It's been more and more increasingly difficult to ever trust a Democratic politician up to this point. But I do think if the Democrats do this right over the next, 4 years, they could come out stronger. I'm just not seeing any of that honesty or self-reflection within the party happen. But once that does happen, and it will inevitably happen, the party will be very strong. But the Republican Party has a much better pulse on the people, in my opinion, right now. But let's hear what they have to say.
To listen in, because no one has more sort of a contemporary ear to the ground than you do, just coming off a few months ago, the campaign trail, meeting people all across this country. I mean, these new numbers that came out of CNN and NBC, I mean, even you had to be shocked by how far we've fallen as a brand.
Yeah, look, and I felt excitement out there, and our policies are popular, by the way. When you pull our policies like paid family and medical leave, support for the environment, reproductive rights, they pull very high. We don't. So what I have to tell you, what I take away from that, Gavin, is that I think we got to be very careful of drinking our own Kool-Aid or believing we're in our bubble, because I truly did think we were going to win. And I say that as someone who has run in traditionally red districts, won close races, and I felt like I had a feel. And I think this is where we're going to have to get out over our skis a bit, try new places. I know we've had this argument, it was out there.
Now, having a feel in Minnesota is very interesting. Minnesota is definitely a very purple state. And uniquely, it's purple in the way that it's extremely liberal and extremely conservative. The conservatives are a little bit more just right of center, but oddly enough, and from my own perspective, it feels like the left, at least in 2020s, was starting to get a little bit more Looney Tune, way too lefty, loosey goosey, and the right keeps on kind of like sliding. It's definitely like socially liberal, physically conservative. That's how I see it myself in a majority of my views. I'm very cafeteria when it comes to my politics. I attribute it a lot to growing up in Minnesota, trying to understand both sides. What Tim Walz generally represents to me is the antithesis of where I've seen a lot of Democratic voters start leaning towards in Minnesota, which is getting to a place of a deep disconnection from what is even understandable for a lot of the conservatives in Minnesota. Let's see how he closes the gap.
Governor, we didn't see you on a lot of, things that weren't mainstream media. We didn't see you on podcasts. We didn't see you doing that. Are you willing to go into those? We need to be willing to go into those spaces. Now, between you and I, Gavin, I don't think we're going to win over those 77 million that voted for Donald Trump. I'm concerned with the 90 million who stayed home. Now, I'm concerned that our policies positively impact those 77 million because you and I represent a lot of independents, Republicans, Greens, as well as Democrats, and we have a responsibility. I don't know if we can necessarily win them over, but I think the thing that we should really soul search on is when the choice was Donald Trump, and J.D. Vance, and Kamala Harris, and myself, and policies that we were clearly articulating, it got pretty close, 77 to 75 type of thing. But it's the 90 million that stayed home. Why did they think we were the same? Why did they think we weren't there? And I think by going into these spaces, to be candid with you, it allows people to express their frustrations. It allows people to articulate what's happening in their lives. It better also be a place where we're hearing and learning, because I'm guessing you're hearing some things that you don't normally hear when you're going on with some of these folks you're on with. They're telling you you don't hear. So
no, and that's this notion of uncomfortable conversations, not just conversations. But let me step back. I love what you said because it's interesting. This notion of our policies are popular, but our party is not popular. And it begs the question some have asked me, and I want to pose it to you. Do you think one of the mistakes is we don't focus first on what we stand for and then make the case, the policy that backs that up and reinforces it, that we are not fundamentally meeting people where they are? They want to know what we stand for.
I think that's good. Yeah. And look, I appreciate, I think we're going to be in hard places, and I think we're going to get punched from both sides doing some of this, but we're not in this to, like I said, we're not banking political capital to win another election. We're trying to improve people's lives. And let's all be very candid. Nobody's lives being improved right now except billionaires. And I don't see that changing. And so I think we're going to have to ask those questions. I think a lot of times the simple answer is it's the messenger. Which I'll acknowledge, maybe the messenger's not good at this. I approach this always, Gavin, like a school teacher. I give a lesson and then I do an assessment of that lesson, and half the students didn't do very well on it. Well, I don't assume that those half are terrible kids. I assume that they have a different learning style, or they weren't hearing the way I was teaching it. Maybe these folks were, verbal learners. Maybe they were kinesthetic learners, whatever it might be. I think we have to approach the electorate like that we think we're telling them where we're at. But for whatever reason, you're right. And this pains me. I tried to make the case. Look, I'm a public school teacher, went to a public university, and according to the Wall Street Journal, I'm the poorest person who ever ran for vice president. That didn't matter to them. And so the idea here that we were trying to craft someone who, for whatever reason, there was a number of people that didn't register with. So I'm with everybody else. And again, when people ask me, I'm probably the last person you should ask for answers because I didn't get it done. But I do believe we were making inroads. And I will have to tell you, one of the most powerful ones for me, Gavin, it's not a great use of campaign time, but we were up in Erie, Pennsylvania on Halloween before the election, and I sat down with 5 undecided voters, and we had a 45-minute give and take on that. I think I got 3 of them for sure, maybe. But, that's how you view it. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is it was really good for me, too, because it was coming back and forth. And this guy says, well, I didn't realize you understood farm policy like this because I'm not hearing that from you guys. He was telling us he wasn't hearing that. And I said, but I do know this. I know the price of corn. I know how these things work. So I think as Democrats, we're going to have to push ourselves into uncomfortable spots. And these town halls, look, I'll be the first to acknowledge you. It's to highlight that their members of Congress on the Republican side are ashamed of Donald Trump's policies. Let's
Is
not.
that, I mean, was that foundationally the why? Was that the inspiration
Yes.
to go out and do it? Yep.
Yes, and I don't demonize these representatives. I honor their service. I went out there, but I lived through this. I went to the town halls during the ACA, and I made a full-throated defense of President Obama's health care bill, and I got reelected. Now, it was a tough fight, but I got reelected. These folks are not going out there, and I'll tell you, it's a huge mistake. Democrats did this in 2010. Oh, these are Republican operatives. They were not Republican operatives. They were my neighbors who were madder than hell and were getting misinformation. But I went out and filled that void. I think we as Democrats have left a void, and that Donald Trump is masterful. Say what you will about this. I don't give him credit. I don't think he's a genius. I don't think he knows how stuff works, but I do think he knows how media works. And I do think he knows that if we're assuming people hear our arguments, they're just so just like that teacher in me. I taught the lesson. This should be easy. Well, that's not how all people learn. It's not how all people's lives are at. And again, I don't, if someone who doesn't believe a woman should have the right to choose, if someone who doesn't believe the president should be restrained by the Constitution, I'm not going to win them. But I don't believe that's a very large percentage of the population.
Right.
But why are they not trusting us? What's your take? I mean, what are you hearing when you hear this? Why are people not trusting the message we were delivering?
Now, I do agree with Walz here where he's talking about there is a large void for the Democratic Party to fill. That's definitely clear. I think, Trump and where Elon stands right now, they're leaving a lot of room for some real conversation. Some of the hard line factors in order to be able to approach the Democrats at this moment, it's so rigid. There's not that much room for conversation. He only mentioned a few of those pillars. If they're very religious in their elements of, if you don't stand by these particular things and see it exactly this way, you're out. And then if you question different things, you're out too. So it's good that he's starting to question, but he's immediately saying, if you aren't for this, then you don't exist. That's a tough way to approach some things, because it's not to say that people don't believe in pro-choice, but they're saying, hey, there needs to be some conversation around it. It's not that people don't believe in gun ownership and the regulation around it, that there should be some regulation, but it's, can we have the conversation? What could it potentially look like? It's not that this country doesn't want immigrants. It's, what does the conversation actually look like in order to get to a place of it being sustainable? That's what I think a lot of Democrats and liberals have been struggling with, is these hardline kind of virtues and values and not being able to be shakeable on them. But I want to hear what Gavin Newsom has to say about it.
Because I keep coming back to this. We needed to have immigration reform to control our borders, and you can do that with humanity. Donald Trump just said they're invading our country and they're eating dogs and cats, and he got more votes. Why is that?
So, I mean, and I want to, and I've strong opinions on that, but I want to sort of stress test yours again, because I think it's interesting. Back to my notion, and you say you're the last person. I'm going to completely dismiss. I think you're the best positioned to understand what's going on. But let me reflect on this notion of you being a teacher and reflecting on how your students did. Did you have an opportunity right after the election to sit down over the course? I mean, I hope you took time off with the family, decompressed. But you had to have had with your team these conversations. Did you have them with the Harris team as well? Did you have them with the campaign team? Have you organized anything more formally, even internally? You got books coming out. They're going to shape those internal conversations. You got one book coming out in a few weeks called Fight that is already starting to frame what did or did not occur. Have you started that process, or has that process been advanced?
A little bit. Yeah, no, you're right. And I've talked to my team about it. Look, as a high school teacher and a governor or whatever, I didn't think about writing a book, but being there, I have. I think we got to tell our story. And I think there's lessons learned to not go back and do a deep dive or a hot wash of this is irresponsible, in my
Right.
opinion. I spoke to the vice president last week. We talked a little bit about this of coming to it, but we haven't done like a formal debrief. And when you're part of it, you've done this. That when
Yeah.
you're part of a team on this, you work together, and I stand by that. I
Yeah.
signed up, and I say this, Gavin, you'd appreciate not the cliches of coaching or whatever, but I feel like I'm the consummate team player. If you are truly a team player, you have a responsibility to make your team better. And that means a responsibility to say, look, we're not making this block here. We need to do this or whatever it is. And we need to be honest that, again, I keep coming back to that number of the folks who stayed home. How in God's name could you stay home during this election? It's pretty hard to blame that on Donald Trump. You know what I mean? That you got a responsibility. They weren't going to vote for him. His people were. But you had a whole bunch of these folks that just said, what difference does it make?
This idea that he's starting to push of saying, let's not even worry about Trump voters. There's no room in that space for my ideology. I'm so different than that individual. I'm a Trump voter. So I'm sitting here going, okay, you're completely just saying, look, you're alienated from anything that I'm thinking about or that I exist within or what I desire. You're out. I'm going to start pandering to this 90 million Americans that don't vote. Well, those people don't vote. That's been a general thing that's happened throughout all American history. There's a huge percentage of the population that doesn't vote. There's this group in the middle that actually ends up choosing what happens based on who's delivering the message. Continuing to isolate anybody who voted for Trump and being like, you're totally out. I am just going to start talking to some people that just generally don't even go out to vote. We're hitting larger voter numbers every single year, like year after year, it seems like. So continue to grow that percentage, but can also having this idea that like you're just out, I'm out on you if you voted for Trump. Good luck.
And how did we as a party get into that? How did we lose the narrative? How much are we ceding ground to the Fox News and the right wing talking heads? How much are we ceding to them, which we don't have a
I don't know how much I need to reiterate this, and I will continue to have this conversation. But the individuals that think that the Fox News voters are the people that actually swung this election, it's not the Fox News individual anymore. There is so many different people, conversations, there's podcasts, there's all these different, and I would really go down to podcasts, but there's so many different conversations that are happening online. They're completely different than the conversations that are happening on Fox. I'm an individual that gets pretty much all of my news from YouTube. And YouTube has a huge broadness to it. Gavin Newsom's proving that right now with his podcast. He's finally diving into it. But when you're generalizing these individuals that voted for Trump based on Fox News, you're completely missing the nuance to what that conversation was really like and what that buildup became from Trump winning the first time and losing. I was a person who didn't vote for him twice and voted for him the third time around. It was because of a lot of this nuance and this tracking that was happening from different airways way outside of Fox that slowly brought me back into a place where I go, ooh, Donald Trump is the individual in this election I can vote for and be comfortable with it. If you continue to blanket Republican voters as Fox News guys, it's not where it lies anymore. There's so much more nuance in the middle and on different airways, podcasts, and other different media outlets. You're missing the point. I do hope the Democratic Party is able to start to diversify a lot of the language and a lot of the conversations that they're having, which we're seeing right here. There's just not that many outlets right now. There's like Pod Saves America, and there's like not that many podcasts right now. There's like the Armchair Expert, which is kind of a liberal podcast, a little bit. But the diversification right now is really on the right when it comes to the nuance of those conversations that we're able to listen to and to build our ideas around. And it's not as cut and dry as just Fox News, as a lot of Democratic voters would love to always, just continue that rhetoric. You're missing the conversations that we're actually having.
Push back on it. And that's fascinating to me. I see that with me. People who have a clearly defined vision of who I am by what they listen to. And I'm like, well, that's not true. None of that is true, but they have it. So
they have it. And I mean, and it's so interesting. I think about you, and, we've talked about this before, this notion of, there was an effort to swift boat you in terms of your military service. Yes. And it's interesting. And Tim, we've also talked about the fact you were part of Kerry's campaign as a veteran, promoting it, watching Kerry by these same folks get swift boated.
And it did it. And I'm telling you, this was one of the most painful ones for me, Gavin, not because I don't go down and throw this in people's faces, but my dad was Korean War era veteran.
Yeah.
He took me, I did it. I don't go out there and say, I'm better than you because I did 24 years, but how quickly these guys dismiss 24 years of honorable service. I rose and served as a highest ranking enlisted soldier where you can get, and they find a way to damage that. And my argument on that has always been, it damages all veterans. But I bet if you went and polled, we see this, veterans voted for Donald Trump when they voted for us.
Right.
We as Democrats, how do you write this off? How do you do this? Or this one? Republicans are more fiscally conservative. That's not true. Republican governors of California have not been fiscally conservative.
No, and I'll remind everyone, $8.4 trillion added to the debt during the 4 years of the Trump administration. And if you want to dismiss that, say it was COVID, it was $3 trillion before the pandemic. He ran deficits every single.
I don't know if I'm an idiot, but who was the last Republican governor of California? I'll look it up on my phone, but was it like Reagan? Like, I don't even know. There has to be somebody in between there. Schwarzenegger? I'll check, but
year. So I stand by what you just said, Tim.
I mean, what do you think happened? And look, you're taking a different approach. You're doing other things. And I said, I think we as Democrats have to give, whether it's Bernie Sanders, whether it's Jasmine Crockett, AOC, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, all of the folks out there, because look, what we have in common is we believe in working people. We believe in fairness. We believe in healthcare. We believe in the environment. We're on the same team as the American public, but how do you see it? I mean, did it feel like we were going to win?
No, I mean, we had that conversation. I felt like that up until election day for whatever reason. And look, but it's interesting. I had the same false sense that I think we all fall prey to. And that is, I was on those campaign buses. I was out there campaigning for you guys. And it's make-believe in many respects. When they say, when you want to go right, they say, oh, no, sir, we got to go left because that's where the crowds are. And we've been working hard to assemble them. And I wonder.
It was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So wrong to think it hadn't happened in a while. 2006. So 2003 to 2011, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Republican. And then Pete Wilson, 1991, 1999. George Dukamajian, I don't know, 83 to 91. So I was wrong. There has definitely been a few Republican governors, but let's drop in. I want to hear. I'm going to actually back up a little bit so I can actually re-listen to have an understanding of what Newsom's going to say about why they lost.
We had that conversation. I felt like that up until election day for whatever reason. And look, but it's interesting. I had the same false sense that I think we all fall prey to. And that is, I was on those campaign buses. I was out there campaigning for you guys. And it's make-believe in many respects. When they say, when you want to go right, they say, oh, no, sir, we got to go left because that's where the crowds are. And we've been working hard to assemble them. And I wonder just in terms of that, and I want to get back to answering your question, but I want to just applaud you for doing these red state tours. But do you fear, and I'm curious if your experience is like this, when you go into those crowds, which were huge, you were in Omaha, you were in Iowa, as well, and you had huge crowds. But do you fear you were talking to our same folks? I mean, or do you feel like there's a bunch of Republicans that were there to listen to you? It's the
No,
opposite.
I don't fear it, but I think we need to be honest with ourselves. The folks who took a beautiful Friday afternoon in Des Moines to come listen to Tim Walz speak probably have a pretty good opinion of me in the first place. But
First
that's
place.
healthy too. That's okay because they're
Yeah.
screaming, "What are you guys going to do about it?" But I do tell you there were some independents there. I doubt if there were a whole lot of Republicans, but I'll tell you what, those Republicans were watching. And I think what I would say if I was them is, look, our representative can do better than Walz. He should do it. He should get out there and do it. This is to put pressure on them to come forward
Great.
because then it really does become a debate about the critical issues. And like I said, they can just come and why did you cut the VA? Just tell us. Tell us why you think that's a good idea. Because I would argue once again, 80% of Americans don't want to cut the VA. And you have to give them statistics and facts. And I think my purpose of this is to force the hand of these folks because I got to be honest with you. I think if they try and defend this stuff, they're going to lose. I believe strongly in that. This isn't just us versus them. This is good policy versus bad policy. And so that's the purpose. But no, I want to be clear to folks who see that. The folks showing up are excited. But here's my thing. 4 months after losing this critical election, our base is still engaged. So I think that polling is interesting, Gavin, that it doesn't mean that there's less Democrats. And the reason that number is so low is if you poll every single year, if you ask the Republican Party their opinion of the Democratic Party, it's very low. The
Sure.
reason our numbers are so low is those are Democrats.
Yep, 63% feel, and I was grateful it was 63%. Still,
Well, here's what I say: I'm not a Democrat. I'm Democratic Farmer Labor. I'm the one person in the country. We're DFL, and so, and I actually think, Gavin, this is an interesting point. While I won't try and tell you we've kept the farmers all with us or whatever, we have kept some of them, like Farmers Union in Minnesota, and these issues around water quality and different things, and we kept labor. And in Minnesota, we really do. This was a marriage between the Farmer Labor Party, which quite honestly was more progressive and leaning into the issues of the working class, and Democrats. And so I think on a national level, we're going to have to conversation of who we are. Because like you said it, people don't believe we're with them. They think we're elitist.
And back to that.
Yeah, I personally don't, maybe I don't have a clear understanding of Walz, but from my understanding, his pockets are in metropolitan areas, not with farmers, definitely more in places in Minneapolis. There's obviously elements of Rochester where I grew up that really support him, but I haven't seen a lot of people that are really like on the ground level, working class individuals super, super love him. It's definitely these more what I would call like your pretentious liberal class, call it your Tesla driving liberal, is who generally loved Walz. So
that little bit. Look, what I love about what you did is you're meeting people where they are, going into red states, but you're also not just meeting them where they are. You're showing respect. You're not turning your back because you're looking at an electoral map and recent experience. Say it's just 7 swing states, and that's all our need to focus on. And I think one of the things the Democratic Party absolutely needs to do is we need to respect the fact that we have to represent the American people, and that means all 50 states. And so going back, showing up matters.
Howard Dean was right. 50 state strategy. And just to be candid, as one of the fringe, kind of washed in with the wave in 2006 when there was the big Democratic wave, it was because of Howard Dean and a few folks that were out there that were saying expand the map. Rahm Emanuel, of all people, was one of them too, said we need to expand the map everywhere. They went into a district that had one Democrat since 1892 and put a little money into it, and I won. And so I think if you want to govern this country, you can't tell Montana they don't matter, or Idaho, or Mississippi. And look, you and I both know this. You also can't tell the Central Valley and things. We're not. Everybody thinks, oh, California's solid.
Quite the contrary. 2/3.
Kind of flip flopping on that. He started this conversation saying, if you voted for Trump, we're not worried about you. We're just going for the 90 million that didn't. Now he's talking about we shouldn't forget the rest of the country. We got 50%. Like flip flop, flip, flop. Like, what are we talking about?
Thirds of the map is deeply red. I mean, it's,
Right.
just America, only more so in California, more hunters, more ranchers, more farmers than other states, and still the largest manufacturing state in America. People forget that as well. So this notion of industrial policy that's worker centered
Right.
is
I have
deeply.
to say, I appreciate, and you're going on talking to, and I get frustrated with some of these folks, I get frustrated with the talking heads and the folks who I think are bad actors. I don't get frustrated with my neighbors who are voting that way. I don't understand it as well, but I'm trying to get them, we have to figure out a way that we're not, the Republicans have done a good job of this. We're the enemy now. Now we're in this situation where they see Russians as being more trustworthy than us. And, that's a sad state to be in.
Unbelievable state. Yes.
And I don't know, again, I don't know if I've got the ability to bring back those 77 million. I do believe we've got the ability to get the disenfranchised folks who are seeing the damage here. And I think that's really important because this isn't about winning elections. This is about what's best for the country. And you'll never convince me siding with Putin and North Korea is good for the country, or fighting a trade war with Canada and Mexico is good for the country. I don't buy it.
Yeah, our friends, and what more evidence do we need to underscore this notion of these principles than what's happened today with the Alien Enemies Act, 1700s, and the deportation, and
I think
just
it's just beginning.
This to me, of all the things that has happened during the Trump administration, the notion that you can completely disregard the federal court and literally challenge the court, and to be, for me, just blatantly in contempt of court. I mean, that's the cornerstone of this constitutional democracy.
And here's what fascinates me is that came up. I watched the Sunday talk shows yesterday. It was all about what's wrong with the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and not
so. Did we get in? Why do we buy their arguments? Why are we fighting fringe red herring issues that get Democrats at Democrats? That Democratic activists screaming at other Democrats. How do we, and I did it, Gavin, I admitted it. I took the dogs and cats argument and ran right with it. And he sucked me in. We have been in these issues where we may not all agree on all the issue, but we buy their frame. And then you have Democrats fighting against Democrats and they sail above it.
They sail above it. I mean, so then you don't want me to ask the Schumer question in the shutdown because it falls right into that frame, doesn't it?
Yes. And having served in Congress, you're an executive. You know what make the hard. I put out a budget and everybody's angry with me. All my friends, including teachers who I'm looking out for them, but you have to do these things. But I think it's in the moment with this. And I look, and this is where Democrats, we actually care about the institutions and we care about people. Like, my opinion on this is I believe Chuck 100% believes that he made a decision that reduced the pain and the risk to Americans. I see it now that we're in a point where I think we're in a new world. That pain is coming anyway. And I'm with you. Yeah. And they think we gave up our leverage. And to make it clear who owns this, because now to the American public who doesn't do this for a living and is out doing their job, they said, well, they passed this budget and they agreed with Donald Trump, and now we all own that. I think you should have made Donald Trump justify why things were getting so bad. And we as governors would do our best to protect the most vulnerable. That seemed to me to be the fight we should have had. But I think the public saying is, you guys weren't even coordinated on that. You weren't. We weren't.
I mean, yeah. And let me ask you, as a party leader, there's this notion, people say, well, what's the party doing? Who is the party? And I'm asking you, I'm serious. Is the party the DNC? Is the party you and Harris? Is it Chuck and Hakeem?
No.
Who is the party? Is it the DGA, the Democratic
I go
governors?
back to it again, Gavin. It's not a flippant remark. It's the people. And then in a democracy, they send people forward to be able to do this. The party is not leadership. The party is there to enable. And I know for me, I wouldn't have got elected.
Now, this is a tough conversation for the Democratic Party to have at this moment, because that hasn't been representative for a while now, right? Since Bernie got thrown under the bus. AOC, they basically threw her out to pasture after she wasn't usable after Donald Trump, and they were like, hey, we want Biden in. She wasn't going to be like a president, but she was going to be a talking point and kind of a political leader. That the whole squad during Biden's run or era pretty much got thrown under after he became president. everyone covered up for Biden's um, ailments, and then immediately Kamala Harris is pushed in front of everybody saying, hey, this is your person. Walz, this is your person. The people haven't run the Democratic Party in a long time. So for anybody who's a Democrat, especially a leader of the Democratic Party, trying to position that this is a party that's run by the people, it has not been. And that's some of the biggest blind spot of all of this. And if they did let this party get run by the people, it would be very, very strong. It would have unbelievable leaders. I think there's probably a lot of really young, affluent, dope leaders in the Democratic Party that we don't even know their names right now. And they've given the Republican Party so much time to be able to retool in this continual push. And again, as even a person who's conservative, I need the Democratic Party to be able to actually figure its shit out, because we do need balance in the United States. You don't just want like a strong Republican Party and a weak Democratic Party. That's not good for anybody. So they need to get their shit together. But him thinking that the Democratic Party is led by the people right now is absolutely bogus.
As a high school teacher with no connections, no political experience, if I wouldn't have been able to go to Worthington, Minnesota and meet a woman named Deb Hokinson, who already knew how to organize a little get together and put me in front of 40 people and let me give my little speech. That's what the party was supposed to do. My job was to hear and reflect from them and then take our values and vote for them. And I think we've gotten ourselves in this bind where we think there's going to be one person. Now, I want to be very clear about this. It doesn't excuse any of us for not being organized, coordinated, thoughtful, delivering a unified message.
And by the way, Tim, we're not doing that. And you know we're not doing that. I don't get calls. I mean, we don't coordinate. There's no deep coordinate. Heck, even in our DGA meetings, let's have that conversation. We're not even focused on policy. It's nice to see each other. We have those side conversations. We'll have panels. And we will discuss in some respects some policy, but at the gubernatorial level, when we're all together, we tend to be having tactical conversations about elections. Forgive me, but not the kind of conversations.
We're probably more unified than anybody, too.
And we are ironically more unified.
Yeah, we're not a caucus, and again, the folks who are out there, whether on social media or the folks at the local coffee shop or whatever, they want us to have a unified message. And here's where I really think they've missed in DC on this. It does feel to me that despite those numbers, the Democratic Party is unified. They're unified in being pissed off at the Democratic Party.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
And they are unified in that Donald Trump's policies are going to hurt people. So I would argue, Gavin, that there's an argument in here. And then I like him a lot, and I think he's right. I think Ezra Klein is giving us a bit of a roadmap here.
Kick in the butt. Yep.
If we blindly say all of our democratic institutions and our government institutions are unquestionably working as well as they should, we open it up. We should be striving to do things better. We should acknowledge. I'm trying to do it here in Minnesota. I'm not going to cut, safeguards around permitting, but I will be the first to acknowledge it takes us too long to permit projects.
There you go.
And it bogs down systems. And I started, we have to bring people in who, look, you're gonna cater to corporate interests or whatever. No, I'm trying to make it easier to build a solar field and be able to get that out there. I'm trying to make
easier to build a solar field in Minnesota. Dude, what are you talking about, man? We're not talking about solar fields. I know that you are talking about small businesses, restaurants, like Montessori schools, getting stuck on this idea of like, hey, yeah, we're trying to like limit or get legislation passed and make it easier, remove red tape for the solar fields. It's like, that is not whatever. Good luck.
Make it easier for somebody to bring in a new business, but not sacrifice worker safety, environmental safety, and that. And we don't acknowledge that enough, I don't think.
There you go.
And they, how Republicans are, I'll cut your taxes and, we'll cut government spending. But now you have all these stories, people saying, well, I voted for Trump and I wanted them to cut government spending, but I didn't mean me. I didn't mean my stuff. We as Democrats have to connect that government does deliver positives, does deliver things, but we're fallible, and it in some cases we get in the way. So say it.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, by the way, we're going to have Ezra Klein on the podcast next week talking specifically about this. And, the old
Tell him
adage.
thanks for me, because I agree with him on this. I think he's trying to figure out a better way, that this isn't an all or nothing. And this is an advantage for us, because Republicans are telling people that all government stinks. You're going to regret this. And I was down in Iowa when the tornadoes are hitting. It's really good to have weather forecasting. Really.
Yeah, no.
And it makes no sense.
It's not about the fact that all government sinks. It's not even about sometimes that taxes are too high or that taxes aren't of value. It's about the fact that if you're not seeing the things that you're supposed to be creating value for in someone's life, so if you're a governor, a mayor, and all these different things, if these different roadblocks that are, or these different safety nets that are supposed to be provided by the government, if you're voting for them, aren't even there when you need them, then people lose trust in it. And I think that there's just this overwhelming amount of money that is being identified that comes through our tax system that doesn't seem to be checked, verified, and being done efficiently. People probably wouldn't have as much issue with the extremely high taxes that are paid if their life was benefited from it. Maybe we're all have these huge blind spots that we go, oh my gosh, I actually don't know all the unbelievable ways that these taxes are benefiting my life. But being someone who's lived in California for the last decade, every single time that we vote for anything here, it's to end homelessness and to help individuals dealing with extreme poverty. And then you drive down the street, and over the last decade, it's only gotten worse, and the money's only gone up. You go, well, how is this possible? How am I not experiencing better solutions with the amount of unbelievable amount of money that's going towards creating these solutions? How am I not experiencing the value of it? And if you don't literally visually see the value changing, especially over like a 5-10 year time, you just stop trusting it. And that's what this is really end up being about. No one is trusting that the government is effectively using our money on behalf of what we even desire. So even if it's someone on the far left, even though I had all these wild social desires that I think the government's supposed to distribute all of our empathy, and I'm acting as if my taxes are a tithe and they're delivering all the empathy of the world, how could you ever turn around right now and go, man, I can totally see that the government is providing what I expect it to provide? It's just not there. So it's a confusing time to be able to sit back and try to reflect on that. I wouldn't have half as much scrutiny of taxes if I saw them being reflected in my day-to-day life.
So tell that story.
It's important. And look, I mean, for things to change, we have to change. And I think we have to own we can control the controllables, and that's how we govern and be more effective. And in so many ways, the world we invented is competing against us as it relates to the paralysis of analysis and process, years and years, as you say, to not just, get a permit, but even to zone a solar projects. This is not just about large factories spewing pollution. This is also about the transition to low carbon, green growth economy. So I couldn't agree.
Again, to think that they're speaking to normal individuals when they're saying it's so difficult to zone a solar project, when I'm hearing people that are trying to start bagel shops or trying to redesign bagel shops saying this red tape is crazy in order to move a sink in the bagel shop. No, Walz, Newsom, the idea, you're not speaking to a normal person if you think you're talking about solar projects that need to remove the red tape. People are talking about moving sinks in restaurants. That's what the red tape needs to get moved. It's crazy. It's about building permits on houses and being able to change the infrastructure of your own freaking backyard. That's what people give a shit about. Solar projects. Good luck.
Agree with your sentiment, and I appreciate Ezra and others bringing that up. Let me ask you, though, just broadly on the issue of the asymmetry, because we keep dancing around this, and there is an asymmetry in terms of the communication. You talked about how you're perceived after this election, despite unprecedented amounts of money that you guys spent, Harris, Walz, on the campaign, trying to define our brand, but how successful they were defining us as opposed to Democrats defining them. It's important to underscore, and I don't think people appreciate this. You look at podcasts, 9 out of the 10 most influential podcasts skew to the right. 9 out of 10. Thank you to the PodSave folks for saving up.
And why is that, though? Podcasting came out of a necessity for the right because a lot of the mainstream airways wouldn't allow these nuanced conversations to happen. So people found new avenues to be able to have those conversations. A lot of the right-leaning podcasts, even a lot of the conversations got spawned from a lot of comedians sprinkling and dabbling some just different nuanced thoughts into the airways and seeing how they actually landed stronger on the general population than a CNN, MSNBC, or Fox actually laid things out. They go, whoa. It's the Joe Rogan effect with a lot of this, where it's you're just a comedian having a little fun, having conversations with his buddies, which then sometimes gets, relatively serious. And they're like, hey, this is what's going on in my life. This is what I'm seeing in our government. What's this all about? And speaking openly honest about it. Boom. Starts to spawn a lot of other people being like, oh, we can finally have these conversations on these airways. Let's chat about it. So it's not oh my gosh, podcasts just are a stronghold of the right because podcasts let it happen. It's no, it came out of necessity because the airways that were controlled by a lot of these different institutions didn't allow this kind of nuanced conversation to happen.
Us, at least allowing us to fight. You've got 14 of the 15 top rated TV shows. 14 of the 15 are on Fox. You've got Sinclair Broadcasting that's filling that void with local newspapers with 185 plus stations. Flooding the zone, coordinated attacks. They're staying on message. They're not allowing distractions to get them distracted. And they're reinforcing a message. It seems to me, that should be a wake-up call to the Democratic Party to figure that out.
Yeah, no, and look, adjacent to this, Voice of America went silent today, which I tell you, having listened to Voice of America living in Asia in '89, I found out that the Berlin Wall fell through Voice of America. And there's a reason that they didn't want you to hear that when you're living in China, because that's pretty threatening to their way of doing things. So I think we haven't conveyed the power of that communication. And as the landscape has changed so greatly, because look, I know you're taking a risk, doing a podcast, doing something to try and fill a void that's out there. And hopefully trying to use it as a platform to articulate our values to a different or broader audience. But we've not figured this out yet. And I think we'd have won this election if we'd have gone on one of those podcasts? No, probably not. But I don't think we'd have got beat by more. No. You know what I mean? I don't think, I think it would have been a chance, but I think any place we can go to talk about our values, the value of these town halls too, Gavin, is that they slow things down and you can talk things through. And I think at the end of the day, you start finding out, there are people out there saying, well, I didn't really realize that. I didn't see it that way. But we're as guilty of this too. I want to go on to places where I get, confirmation bias, which I already believe it. And then
of course
people turn to. We've got to broaden it. We've got to get to more people. We've got to recognize the disconnect between our policies and how people view them. And I think this is just me, I'm going to say it, that I think somebody's got to be big and strategic and macro. I just look at every one of these issues through the individual lens, how it's impacting them. And I try and stay in that space. And I'll be the first to admit to you, I view most issues through the eyes of a teacher. It's just who I am. Like a thing when those kids come in the classroom, that means I view homelessness, food, insecurity, inclusion. I view all of those things through the eye of a teacher, what it means to be in that, because I believe that in America, that's the great hope, the great equalizer, the great experiment. And so something in there we're missing in a pretty big way, obviously.
No, and hard to argue with your broader frame and the values, but I think it's just this idea. I think the biggest and the most alarming part of these polls is that people feel we're out of touch.
Yep.
And despite what I thought was an incredibly effective campaign in terms of highlighting the needs of the American people, I thought just the importance of having you on the ticket to articulate exactly what you just articulated really reinforced and underscored the benefits of someone that is able to, through your lived experience and through your eyes, be able to express what I think the vast majority of people embrace. But again, they're still not embracing what we're selling.
You think it's this idea, Gavin? You think it's because we appear weak? Do you think it's...
Yeah. Well, I remember Bill Clinton said it better than anyone years and years ago after shellacking. Given the choice, I'm paraphrasing, the American people will always support strong and wrong versus weak and right.
Because I saw it for me, and not that I spend much time thinking about this, and it just baffled me how much time they spent trying to attack me that I wasn't like masculine enough in their vision. Yes. Like I would have never believed this. I saw Fox News did like a couple days because I used a straw. And I'm like, hell, man, how else do you drink a milkshake type of thing? But they focused on it obsessively, which I think, again, is their obsession, their weirdness. We buy their frame on these issues of sexuality, but their whole thing is that they spent all their time, these guys on Fox News, that Walz is gay, he's not masculine, he doesn't coach football the way he should or doesn't. What do you think about this? I mean,
it's
this misogyny in here that's happening.
Yeah, well, but this notion of masculinity is deeply part of it. And that's one of the. I mean, I think it goes. And you can look at the reasons why we've had this.
The reasons why this particular time around was the extreme amount of government overreach that happened throughout COVID that didn't let anybody speak about what was happening and how it was absolutely forced down our throat. And enough happened for the pendulum to swing for Biden to be able to get in. But everything that continued to happen thereafter continued to erode the trust of the government. The way that Gavin Newsom handled COVID, the way that Walz handled COVID. Newsom was at, the French Laundry during lockdowns. They locked down the beach. They put police officers at the beach because of social distancing problems at a beach all down the California coast. Walz sat in excitement saying, look, we're so strong in this that we're even isolating our own grandma from our communication and from us helping. We're just dropping meals off at her door because that's the way we do it here. That's not the way that I know a lot of Minnesotans to do it. And then the way that Biden was continued to create this expectation that he's healthy when everyone could clearly see that he wasn't. And then just in time can make everybody feel like they're crazy if they thought anything else. And then throw Kamala into a place where there's only 100 days left. She's not going to win, but if you don't vote for her, you're racist. And she was part of the cover up that was happening with Biden the whole time. And they could have probably made this unbelievable push to allow their own base to be able to create a situation of who do you actually want, which that could have even happened earlier with Biden from the beginning, that he didn't even need to get in from the jump. There was enough anti-Trumpness going on that anybody could have probably beat Trump going into Biden's first term. And they chose to put in somebody who was much too old to carry it all out. And I do think if they put the right person in at that time, there probably would still be a Democratic president in the White House. They probably would have held it down for 8 years because Trump's a wild enough guy that people would say, we don't want that to happen. But the continual distrust of their own party and their own voters to force down whoever they want to force down their throat. That's why this has happened to the Democratic Party, and no one wants to listen to it. And you still have this Walz going like, what the heck happened? It's like, dude, you happened. The fact that he is somehow a leader of the Democratic Party, or Gavin Newsom is somehow still a leader of the Democratic Party, that's the crazy part, because you have these old white dudes who are leading this establishment that's supposed to be like caring about or being all about something that's like totally opposite of half these freaking guys. So it's just a weird thing that the establishment of the party will not give up the seat at the table that they're telling everyone else to give up. They're like, hey, we need equity and inclusion in our country. We need equity, inclusion, all this. And no one's even saying we shouldn't. But then you have all of these guys just like holding the mantle at the top and not allowing it ever. Even with Kamala Harris, it was like she was totally tied to all the bullshit that came with Biden. And then even if she was going to be able to have her own interview, it came with Walz sitting right next to her at her side. They never even gave her a position of real power. So when you go, what happened? You all happened. That's why, give up the freaking reins.
This sort of dialectic over the Me Too movement. We've had this dialectic even prior to the Me Too movement. This
How do you
notion
fight it?
And well, this
I
notion
think
of
I could kick most of their ass. I do think that if they wanted to. I know I can outrun them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing.
Counter but it's a natural reaction. I think it's one of the reasons we're losing so many men. And again, it's multi-ethnic. It's not just white men. We're losing them. We're losing them to these guys online. We're losing them people that I'm bringing on this podcast as well. That's why I brought.
These are bad guys, though. These are bad guys.
But they exist, and we could deny they exist.
That's the premise. They're bad guys. That's the premise. When you're always countering, I don't even think Gavin Newsom and Tim Walz are bad guys. I'm just saying they're bad representatives, and they're not being honest with themselves, and they don't reflect the majority of the population. I know Tim Walz wants good shit. He probably cares about Minnesota. He just doesn't care about Minnesota in the way that I desire it. Gavin Newsom probably cares about California. I know he does. He just doesn't see it in the way that I desire, and he doesn't articulate it in that version of it. That's what it is. But when they just blanket state they're bad guys, it's like, no, you're just a bad representative for what I actually want my politician to do. And it's like, everyone goes, well, what the fuck is Trump then? It's like, he's a better representation of what I desire than you are. So get with it.
They exist. Not only they exist, they persist, and they're actually influencing young kids every single day.
How do we push some of those guys back under a rock?
I think we have to first understand what their motivations are. I think we have to understand what they're actually doing.
Wow. Actually, Newsom is speaking some reality into Walz in this moment, being like, you need to listen to these individuals. You can't push them back under a rock. What are you talking about? All right, Newsom, I don't want to get in the way of this. You're actually speaking some truth.
You don't think that's racism and misogyny?
I think there's a lot of that, but I don't think it's exclusively that. When you talk to a guy like Steve Bannon, he reminded me a little bit of my grandfather when he talks about working folks and he talks about how we hollowed out the industrial core of this country. But I understand that. But so we can dismiss the notion of election denialism. We could completely dismiss what he did on January 6th, but I don't think you can dismiss what he's saying. Reminds me a lot of what Bernie Sanders was saying. Reminds me a lot of what Democrats said 20, 30 years ago. I mean, he's arguing
he hates
against
Musk, right? He hates
Musk. He hates the oligarchy. He totally agrees with you on the concentration of monopolistic powers. He completely dismisses the notion that we should extend the tax cuts for corporations and the very wealthy. He thinks we should lower taxes for the middle class and wants to see increased taxes.
I can't message to misogynists. I can't message that women shouldn't have equal.
But I think if we say people are misogynist, then we're falling prey. We're in that frame. Not everybody that disagrees with us is a misogynist, even those that. But I think this notion of toxicity in masculinity needs to be separated, and I think it's been conflated. And I think we're going to have to work on that a little bit. And I think there is a
I think
crisis
some of us scare
with
them. I
men.
think I scare them a little bit why they spend so much time on this. No, I'm serious because I can fix a truck. They know I'm not bullshitting on this.
Yeah.
I'm not putting this in people's grill. I don't know if my identity is not hunting. My identity is not football coaching. My identity is not, a beard and a truck. I like all those things. But how did we get to this where have they figured it out that the identity piece of this is more important than the actual substance behind
Well,
it?
they've been doing it for decades. I mean, we've saw the welfare queens. They've seen the Southern strategy. We've seen it over and over. It's an old playbook, and we're as dumb as we want to be that we allow them to do this with CRT and ESG and DEI and every three-letter word.
And then they demonize people.
Yeah, demonize, and they weaponize grievance. They other people. They talk down to people, past people. They humiliate people. They weaponize difficult issues. But the bottom line is, and I think it goes back to what we began with, is, and I applaud you for this, is we cannot continue.
See, what is difficult sometimes about what the Democratic Party is discussing in this particular moment is these are two leaders of the Democratic Party talking about the Republican voter, saying the Republican voter is talking down to them as the Democratic leadership is talking down to the Republican voter. Now, that's a disposition that is interesting about it because Trump, oddly enough, doesn't do as much talking down as it comes off. It's definitely when he's communicating to his party. It's much like we're doing this. We are making America great. We're doing all that there. And then he just throws jabs at the other side. Both parties do it, but I do think that Trump communicates much clearer to the masses as being representative of the fact that he did win the general population this last time around. It's interesting to see Walz continue to not get it, but I don't believe that his intention is to get he's clearly articulated he doesn't care about the people that have voted for Trump. He just wants to empower the 90%, but the isolation that he creates in these types of moments, even Gavin Newsom's trying to like walk him back from the ledge. He's still struggling with understanding what Newsom's actually talking about in this moment.
Continue to be on the defense, reacting to this.
I
We've
agree.
got to go on the offense. We got to meet people where they are. But I also think this, and this is where, this is part of the conversation I'm trying to have, is you got to respect people you disagree with, even, and you can't just dismiss people. We can't just turn our back on people.
What did you learn from those guys?
That not only they have a huge following, there's a rationale. Look, for Steve Bannon, I'm not here to defend Steve Bannon. I couldn't agree with you more as it relates to what he did on election denialism. And, look, that guy, we could spend hours and hours going down the rabbit hole of Steve Bannon. But what he's talking about in terms of populism, what he's talking about in terms of working folks, what he's talking about from a global construct about what's happened to middle America and rural Americans and why they've lost trust with our party, what he's talking about with what's happening with men in this country and how they've lost their way and how they have significantly higher suicide rates, lives that more despair and isolation. I think those are real issues that our party needs to come to grips with.
How did their populism win out over ours? Because I'm actually a prairie populist. That's where I
think we stopped talking about those things. We're not talking about what's going on with men in this country. My wife did a documentary called The Mask You Live In 15 years ago, was talking about these things. Somehow, I don't know what happened. The party never picked up on these core things. There's trend line. I mean, Scott Galloway gets it. He's a good guy across the board. There's a crisis of men and masculinity in this country. And that's a hard thing for Democrats because we want to lift up women. We want to lift up the oppressed. We want to lift up minorities.
As we lift up, I always use this analogy that there's a whole bunch of people, Gavin, that see rights like a pie. If somebody gets some, they lose part of their pie.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Not that way. Expanding rights that there's no one. I keep coming back to that idea and this idea of freedom that, well, that can be everybody. I don't know why they're in these small, little, narrow, divisive issues, other than I think some of these people are masterful at it so they can get to their true goal, which is to cut taxes for the wealthy and shift wealth in their direction.
Yeah, and by the way, and concurrently increase tax.
Except, yeah, I mean, he's speaking obviously of the Republican candidates, not the population, but the voters, why would they want to just give tax cuts to the rich in this type of moment? And again, people always say, well, you're voting against your best interest. That's been a continual line for a long time, and it doesn't seem to work.
Taxes for the middle class and the poor, and people
Yes.
forget that. Some
Yeah.
of the highest tax play. I mean, I live in a state, and like your state, where
Resident tax.
literally, I mean, look, exactly. By the way, which what Bannon is arguing for, which is interesting and ironic considering some of the punditry. But let me just make this point because it needs to be made. In Florida and Texas, they tax their poorest more than we tax our richest.
That's 100%
How the
correct.
hell are we losing this tax debate?
Yes.
Who are you for?
100%. You'll pay
I mean,
more.
they have- I mean-
high tax states, apparently.
Yeah.
Well,
And they have higher infant mortality, higher maternal mortality, lower wages. They have lower
Lower home
insured.
growth, lower
Thank
life
you.
expectancy, everything.
Yeah. And by the way, 71, I'm going to keep going. 71% of the economy in this country are in blue metros. So point being, we it's not that we're not right, but I think we're wrong not to understand more deeply and fully that people think we are deeply full of ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're talking down to people and past people. People want to be protected, they want to be respected, and they want to be connected. And I think this notion of respect is something that keeps coming back to me. People that just feel like we don't respect them. And I think
How do
that's
we
really,
do?
Wow. I mean, I have to give it to Gavin. Like, he is definitely starting to be more introspective, or he's at least learning how to speak to the masses in this type of space. It's so interesting to see a Newsom who's preparing to actually run for president, and a Walz who's still dusting himself off from a race that he was able to observe so closely to it as a VP, not understand the correlation. Maybe Newsom had a little bit of benefit of being a little bit disconnected to be able to see the missed marks, but he's tying it together pretty well. We'll have to see if he continues to lead with the new conversation that he's starting to articulate. But in this moment right now, he's definitely saying the right
Do
thing.
that,
important
though,
to
Gavin, and lay down a clear marker that you're not going to demonize LGBTQ people. We're not going to
Yeah.
let that happen. How do we lay that marker down? Because I'm not going to get into their space with them of that's what a man looks like. Demonizing these. How do we stay firm, show that we're committed, and not compromise on those values that we care about?
I mean, we continue to do what we.
Well, how you do that, Walz, is when Gavin Newsom is discussing very articulately to you of why there's a large disenfranchised group that feels disenfranchised in the United States. There's this population of men that have totally fleed your party, and Newsom's going, hey, these are an individual. It's not even just white guys at this point. It's it's multi, it has more diversity than you would perceive in this moment. It's a bunch of dudes that are saying, hey, the Democratic Party isn't listening to the different things that I'm working through in order to be able to create the life for me and my family to make it happen. He immediately Walz then says, okay, I don't understand this conversation about guys. I'm going to say, well, how do we make sure that people respect LGBTQIA people? That is the disconnect. Can we not just continue to have like the conversation that was being had and get obviously into the conversation about LGBTQIA later down in this podcast, but to think that the conversation around men who are working, that are trying to build families, then immediately has to push over to, well, then why aren't we respecting gay rights? Dude, these are totally two different types of conversations. And when it immediately always blows back into that, you're going to lose more dudes.
You and I have done. We've led the nation in terms of laws, anti-discrimination laws. We have the back of our diverse communities. We don't just rhetorically say that. We've done it through laws and regulations. We stand firm. At the same time, with respect, and this is where obviously I've kind of, it's not like even a break. I just think there are areas where we may overreach. And I think we have to acknowledge that as well. And if you don't acknowledge that, then I think you're going to lose people on everything else. I mean, I look at the issue of gay marriage. And remember, I was in 2004 when our party was dismissing me because I sat and I said it was wrong to deny people the right to get married or that weren't of the same sex. And my party vehemently opposed that. And they were very vocal about it, the major leaders in our party.
I remember this. I ran on it in 2006 in a conservative district.
God bless you. And stood on principle.
Are we not doing that enough right now?
What's that?
Are we not doing that enough right now?
No, we are doing that. We continue to do that. I think we're firm in our foundation in terms of supporting our diverse communities. It's not that. I think there's a broader message, and there's a whole world out there that's not just about protecting those rights. It's about also acknowledging the pain that other people are feeling that often are not part of our rhetoric and our agenda. And that's what I think we need to explore.
I think you're hitting on. I'm curious to listen. I want to listen to Ezra next week because I think that's the other thing that I think we talk a lot and we have to deliver more. You've delivered. I think we've delivered in Minnesota. And I've seen this. When you deliver on things that improve people's lives, it's amazing how good the politics is behind that. If you have good policies and get things done. And part of that is, I think where Ezra's getting that is do your best work, but acknowledge, really this agency's not doing that much for people. I mean, like I'm doing this thing, just simple things to make them getting their driver's license easier. You and I both deal with this, the DMV. Like I'm trying to fight. Why do we make them go every year? Maybe we should go every 2 years. Something, just something that people want to see. We did this thing where you can now get your license tabs through a vending machine at Cub Foods. So you just go up there, it takes you 2 minutes, you put in your stuff and it spits out your tabs and you put your tabs on. That one to me is, as conservatives are like, good. I didn't have to deal with government. It was efficient. It was easy. But that was government. But
now, the only difficult part in California is the tabs end up being like $800, maybe $400. You get 1 or 2 tickets. It's like $800 real quick. Start limiting some of those prices or the prices that you're paying for these things. Let's see the value in it. But
it was good functioning government.
That's it. And so you were Doge before Doge, but without the pejorative sense of Doge, which is not about that. That's about recklessness. That's just about destroying the administrative state. But what you're talking about is government efficiency, focusing on outcomes, not just inputs, meeting customers where they are, which I love. And that's got to be part of our core messaging. And I think that's our challenge with Doge is we're reacting to Doge by saying it's all terrible, which it has been to date. But this notion of government efficiency,
it works so well for them because people believe that. And look, it's been 40 years since, your predecessor, Reagan, told them, you don't want to see government coming. Government can be a great force of good, whether it's protecting your personal rights, whether it's innovation. Look, good for SpaceX. I hope they succeed. But let's be clear, SpaceX stands on the shoulders of NASA giants, and that's our taxpayer dollars that did that. There are great things, but I've always been a firm believer. We can do the research, send it into the private sector, let them improve, monetize it and help people as long as there's guardrails. I think we find ourselves now pushing back anything that's business oriented. We're kind of negative to. I feel I'm hearing it from the business community. Look, like they don't like Trump right now. They're not being courageous enough, in my opinion, to speak out, but they don't like this. But they also say, well, I don't hear a lot from you guys saying that, these businesses added to the cultural, tapestry of Minneapolis by founding.
I thought it was.
There you go. Walz makes a good point. That there's so much truth in that, and so at least there's a little bit of introspection in that. The Democratic Party is not speaking to businesses at all at this moment.
A masterclass. It offended all of us. It offended me, but also I thought it was a masterclass to have all those folks up there on stage. I mean, Trump was able to communicate without saying a word his support for free enterprise. The same time, I thought, it was kind of humiliating for those folks that felt they had to go up there.
You think it was fear that they were up there for, though?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they had to fall in line. I mean, this guy doesn't play by any rules, and that's why he has more options.
Democrats can't govern by fear. But I've said this, Gavin. I taught 4th grade. Fear is
Democrats can't govern by fear. COVID.
Incredible short-term motivator.
That's right.
It change behaviors, though, for the long run. What are we going to have to do? You feel this excitement, you have these rallies, but what's that translating into? What's that turning into?
Well, look, back to, I think, this forensic, it's not just tactical. It's not just about, how we can sort of just stretch and get another 20, 30,000 votes in these swing states. I mean, I think it's an opportunity for us to address some of the issues we just discussed. I love that you said this. You can't be pro-job and anti-business. I mean, you made a case for entrepreneurialism and innovation and research and development. I love that. I want the Democrats to talk more about that. I want us to talk more about not begrudging people's success, but celebrating success.
Yes,
I
agree
used to
with
be the aspirational party. I want to talk about patriotism and pride, not
They
just
get it
our.
wrong.
And sorry, Gov, but just back to Clinton. I love what Bill Clinton said when he talked about community, opportunity, and responsibility. I think we don't talk enough about responsibility. And I appreciated the opportunity agenda. I appreciate our focus on community and building community. But what about responsibility? What about service? What about civics? What about these notions of things that bind us together?
Yeah.
All our interesting differences. We're good at focusing on interesting differences. But what about the things that unite us together? I think that's what people want to hear from our
want to
party.
be part of something. That's why they're on with Trump. They're part of something. They're part of a team. I've always said this. In high school, I did everything. I coached all the sports. I worked on the play, the musical. I sponsored the student trips. I built the prom. I did all of that because what I understood is kids will gravitate to groups, and it's better to be in the musical than in a gang. It's better to be with this group of kids in school. So we know this. If a kid is part of something, they do that. And I'm telling you, this disenfranchisement with men, this not being there, whatever, they might have played on football teams. I think Trump gives them that feeling that I'm on the team.
Yep.
I wear the same colors. I do all this. I don't look, you can laugh all you want about red hats. People like those damn things, don't they? And maybe some of it's sticking it in our grill, but I think it's being part of something bigger than themselves. And right now, the Democratic Party doesn't feel like something bigger than themselves.
Whoa. The Republican Party makes you feel like you're part of the United States and the mission of it. Good job, Walz. Now you're connecting some dots.
And that's our whole goal, community.
I love it. No, look, and that's why I'm such a believer in service, such a believer in shared experiences. And
I'm trying to copy what you did on the service stuff. I said, Stanley McChrystal, there's a few folks out there talking about this. Use service learning and these types of things, stuff I've been interested in too. From the teacher perspective, if you do that, you are so engaged in your community. Now, we celebrate and we rightfully should those who join and serve in the military, but there's numerous ways to serve your country.
You got it.
It's not in uniform. And I'm thinking as we become more fragmented, our media becomes more fragmented, our TV becomes more fragmented, people want to be part of something. And I think Trump knew that before us, and he brought them into that. And that's why in the catchphrases and stuff, it may seem cheesy, but we're missing it. We're missing where people are not wanting to become part.
Yeah, he's definitely he's surface level identifying it. He doesn't remember. He's not identifying the deeper essence of being part of a larger goal, not just the catchphrases, not just the hat, not just we're a team, but like why are we a team? And it's a lot of what Trump is, I think, highlighting is that America is a beautiful place, and that to be on this team is something that's aspirational. It's something that it has been good, it will be good, and will be continue to be good, or continue. Maybe he's less of saying good, but continuing to win. And he is identifying that there's a team element to this, that the Democratic Party has ostracized anybody with any different type of thought, if to bring up conversation. Hey, maybe it's kind of weird that we can't discuss COVID. Boom, you're gone. Hey, can I raise my hand and ask about what we really want to discuss in schools? Boom, you're out. This bathroom topic seems to be a little confusing. Maybe we should rethink it. Boom, you're out. So you've kicked everybody off the team. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Vivek, freaking JD Vance didn't even vote for Trump last time. Half of Trump, RFK, half of our majority of Trump's team is people you kicked off your team.
Part of something.
I said the universality of this notion of being protected and respected, but back to your point, 100% agree, connected. We all need to be connected. There's an unmooring that's going on in society. I mean, people just feel lost. They feel more isolated. They feel more alone. And again, particularly for young men. And so I just think we have to acknowledge that. We have to address that. We have to be sensitive to that. And we have to be willing to have those conversations and not feel like we're playing into the right wing when we're having those conversations.
And the politics will follow that. The politics will follow that.
And the politics go back to what you said, which I love, man. It's just the principle. Like what I love about you, and we're out of time, so I'm just going to end with just mad respect, is you're a man of principle. You're a man of values. You're a decent and honorable person. Forget the politician. What I love about the politician, Governor Walz, is that you're all of those things I just said before the word politician. And so I think
I appreciate it.
No, and we'll find the political way back, but I think we have to have some humility in terms of where we are, and I think we can't be. I just think we have to be careful about being too dismissive of where they are and the progress they've made. And I know you broadly agree with that, and I think the vast majority of people do. But I think this is an existential moment, and our unity against Trump is not increasing our trust. It's not helping the Democratic brand. The more we attack Trump, which is great. I mean, we've got to do it. We got to hold him to account. And people, you hear it. What did you say? The primal screams.
Yeah, we got to offer them something. We got to offer.
But we have to, exactly, and that's what we need to. I think that's the soul searching.
We have to be their. We have to be the Vikings to their Packers, is what I would say, Gavin. We got to get people in. And I think I would say to your listeners and everybody out there that we're going to have to ruffle feathers. We as Democrats aren't going to agree on everything, but our values are still there, and we have to figure out how to have that. And I would ask, a frustrated and scared, to be honest with you, scared electorate, to stay engaged. They are. That's what they're showing up at those town halls. And then I would encourage our folks to listen and rise to the moment, and do the things that we need to do to get back, not to win elections, but to influence policy in a positive way. So I'm grateful. I know you got a big job. You govern a country, and
and you and I both have day jobs, which we can't forget. But look, this notion of a big tent, that's what built the middle class in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. What's brought us Medicaid and Medicare. That's what brought us the minimum wage as we know it today. It was a big tent Democratic
Lean into labor
Party.
unions. Lean into labor unions.
And labor. It's got to be worker-centered. Industrial policy that's worker-centered. That's Tim Walz, my guest today here on the This is Gavin Newsom Show.
Thanks,
Tim,
Governor.
it's great to have you.
Thanks so much.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where. I need everything. Trust me, I hear what.
So that was Gavin Newsom and Tim Walz. Good conversation. Interesting to hear that inner dialogue between two Democratic leaders. Obviously, I had a lot of thoughts on it. Thank you for listening, and see you next time. Over and out. Bye.